Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gilmoss, and joining me today I have Nina Edwards. Welcome,
Hi.
Nina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And you're not so far away, you're in Essex, is that right?
It is, yep.
Yeah, I'm over here in Kent. Just probably bump into you at Blue Water one day. So, Nina, thank you for putting yourself forward to share your story. And I know we both discussed the kind of pre-show nerves that all the guests have and that I still have, because I feel a great weight of responsibility to do your stories justice. I don't take this job lightly. So we were just discussing breathing and saying how my counsellor's like, you need to breathe into your lungs, not just into your chest. So we're going to do deep breathing. And I'm going to ask you to just talk to me a little bit about, well, a lot probably, about Owen, your husband. And it's quite a tragic story, isn't it? Because you met a bit later in life and then he died, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't be sat across from me on a microphone.
Yeah.
So firstly, I'm really sorry for your loss. I know it can sound trite, but I genuinely am sorry for your loss. And if you'd be so kind, would you tell the listeners a little bit about how you ended up here? You can start from the beginning if you want. You start wherever you like.
I'll start from the beginning. So me and Owen got together in 2017. At that point, I had been on my own with my kids for about 8 years. I'd split up with their dad when they were both fairly young. My daughter was only 2. I met Owen through our sons playing football together, Sunday League football. And bizarrely, the first time I met him, which I think the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, I was introduced by one of the other mums, and I remember walking away and thinking, there's just something about him and I don't know what it is. But he was married at that point, and we just sort of remained friends, and we chatted at football and so on and so forth. And then him and his wife split up, and we realised that there was something between us and decided to give it a go. Obviously, at the start, because he had recently split up and because our kids knew each other, we kept it very secret. I didn't want to introduce my kids to anyone that I wasn't 100% sure was going to go somewhere. So probably the start of the story was we went away for a weekend, and on the first evening he said to me, I need very seriously, which considering we were first start of a relationship and a few drinks in, and he sort of said, I need to tell you something. I've got an illness. It's under control, but I do have this illness. I've got colitis.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, oh, it's the same sort of thing, colitis, Crohn's. I knew people who had Crohn's, and it's just a manageable condition. Be careful what you eat. And he sort of played it down that he took medication, but it was all under control and there was no issues. And to be honest, with hindsight now, I wish I'd looked into it more. I wish I'd known more about it, but I just kind of carried on. And
I like to call this sort of widow hindsight, or widow rear view mirror, because we were very innocent before that, weren't we? We didn't think that terrible things happened, and your perception of the world was very different.
And I think with the condition being a bowel condition, romance, last thing I really want to talk about is his bowel habits. Exactly. And the last thing he wanted to share. So I just kind of, let it go. I knew he took medicine before he ate. Didn't really think much more of it. Knew he had regular checks. And so we carried on. And, by the end of that year, we knew it was serious. And, we told children, unfortunately, with his divorce and his children, his relationship with his children broke down.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, in 2018, he moved in with me and my kids. And we had some very tough times, obviously, with the relationship with his children, his divorce. We both went through redundancies. We both worked jobs we didn't like at that point.
Lockdown.
My
Chuck that in for good measure.
Yeah, my daughter and him locked horns. She'd never, she was only 2 when me and her dad had split up, so she'd never really known me be with someone. I think possibly having to share me slightly. They used to lock
I
horns
have
all
to
the time.
say, I'm pretty glad I met John when Tabby was younger, because I think now,
she was hitting teenage years, and it was tough. But we always joked, if we can get through all this, we'll get through anything.
Get through anything.
Then COVID came along just to make sure that we definitely knew we'd get through anything. And it was again, the colitis obviously was in the background. There was a few times he'd had flare-ups with stress and a few things I'd sort of mention, but he was very he didn't like talking about it. And if I mentioned anything to do with toilet habits, I was being vulgar and don't discuss that. And
it's so much part of the problem, isn't it? It's why so many women actually it's missed in women, because we don't like to talk about our toilet habits. I'm quite squeamish myself, but being married to a man who lost somebody to bowel cancer, I know all about toilet habits. But I think we almost need to move away. It's human bodily functions, and the more scared we are of talking about it, the more likely things are to go undiagnosed. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. Do continue.
No, that's as you say, with hindsight, I wish now I'd known a lot more about the condition and the possibilities, because I was completely oblivious. Yeah. But so we went on, and I think end of 2020, start of 2021, we'd both got new jobs that we were liking. We decided that we were going to buy a house together. His relationship with my daughter, it all was going in the right direction. Summer of 2020, we found our dream home. Absolutely, we'd walked our dog down this road every day, and we always said, this is the road we want to live down, dream, reality, this will be it. So in November 2021, we moved into our dream home, and it was perfect, and we started decorating and making it ours. And then Christmas Day 2021, he proposed. And
romantic. Got him out of buying a Christmas present.
It was very romantic. And I'd never been married. It was something I'd always said, I'm getting on a bit now, might not get my dream wedding and my dream. So he knew how much it meant to me to have my wedding. And I've always been very close to my parents, especially the amount of help they gave me when I was on my own with the kids. And my dad loved him. My daughter says, if I hadn't been around him and my dad would have been best mates. So he did it properly. He asked my dad if he could ask me. We got engaged, and it was just, wow, this is just everything. Dream house, kids are happy. We went out New Year's Day to look at a wedding venue and booked it straight away.
Wow.
I wasn't messing around. He'd asked, and I was making sure he wasn't getting out of that. We booked the venue for that summer, the 19th of August. First venue we went to, I went out with my mum and my daughter and my bridesmaid on the 8th of January. First shop I walked in, found my dress instantly.
It's all going too smoothly, isn't it, Nina? It's all going too smoothly.
And now I look back and think, you thought you had this all planned out. First, next shop, shoes, next shop, bridesmaid dresses. I came back from one day shopping. I was like, pretty much, that's it. You're locked in now. This is it. Venue's booked, dresses organised, and everything. And it was just, we were still decorating the house. And then in March, he'd started saying, I'm a bit worried I'm going to the wee a lot. I'm certain age, prostate, etc. I'm going to go and get checked out. And I was like, okay. Again, he could be a little bit being a man of a, I've got this.
They tend to go either way, don't they? They either won't speak about it, or
it might be something serious, and you'd be like, no, it's an ache, like everyone. But again, I think working full time, 2 kids, dog, wedding, decorating a house, it was just, no problem. He went off to the doctors. He had a blood test, and they were going to send him for ultrasounds, and the blood test result came back and it showed he was slightly anemic. And again, that night he got into bed and he said, oh yeah, I'm anemic, I'm going to die. And I said, no, you're not. Don't be so bloody dramatic. It's anemia. Loads of people, obviously, again, widow hindsight, he knew that anemia could be linked to bleeding in the bowel. He knew colitis could be linked to bowel.
I had no idea.
Now, but I had no idea of
I had no idea. In fact, until you said it just then, I had no idea that anemia could be part and parcel of bowel conditions. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So,
I had no idea when I look back now through medical records, etc., that colitis has such a link to
no, I didn't either, actually.
But really, I just completely and utterly stop being dramatic. It's anemia. It's just go to bed, basically. Yeah. But everything else came back normal. No issues with prostate. Again, they'd said to him, come back in about 4 weeks for repeat bloods. So we'd carried on, didn't even think much more of it. And then the beginning of May, he said, I haven't heard from the doctors for my repeat bloods. I think I better trace them up and get that done. And I was like, okay, yep, no problem. So we'd phoned the doctors, got the repeat blood test booked in, and that evening we get a phone call from the doctor saying, do you feel okay? And he was, yeah, feel fine, no problems. And they said, well, you're very anemic. Your iron levels have really dropped, and we think maybe you should go and have a blood transfusion.
Oh, wow.
And we was a bit sort of taken back, and he said, no, I feel fine. It's fine. I'll come and see you tomorrow. So he went to see the GP the next day, and again, I don't know if he didn't tell me to protect me or to not make me worry, but it was kind of, they're going to send me for a colonoscopy just to check things out. And again, I was completely oblivious. Just, yeah, okay, yep, no problem. Took him for the colonoscopy. I remember he sent me off while he was in the hospital having the colonoscopy, go to Asda's and buy me steak and this and all his favourite foods and milk. In fact, that, yeah, he was going for an appointment. And
yeah, of course.
And again, he come back from that, and I saw the word cancer on this piece of paper, but it was more sort of what they were checking for. It didn't actually say anything. So again, I look back now and I think, why didn't I take any of this more? But I suppose because he wasn't.
And because the human brain is very, very clever, and because your brain will have been trying to protect you at all costs from accepting that this might be something serious.
Yeah.
And you know, the innocence, it's people have anemia and get better. And in fact, the interview I put out on Monday, he's partly had anxiety and high blood pressure. And, you know, you don't really worry about it in people of sort of our age. And then he just died. You know, it is that the new way you view the world once you've been widowed is now anytime anybody's sick, I'm like, oh, I might die.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't look at it like that. Even with the police at my door, I was, you know, it's the bargaining, isn't it? It's the part of bargaining.
But we went to a couple of weeks later, we went to a party, one of his friends' birthday parties, and everyone kept saying, oh my God, look, you know, you've lost loads of weight, you know, are you ill and all this? And he was like, no. He was like, oh, she just works me so hard. We've been decorating a house and she only ever eats salads. And if anything, it was kind of oh, you look really good. You've lost a load of weight. And again, it was just put to the back of my mind, because obviously you see somebody every day. It's very hard to even notice that they've lost.
Well, it's like your kids. You don't even notice them growing, do you, until their arms are sort of, jumpers are halfway down their arms.
So, yeah. And then on June the 16th, he went to get the results of the colonoscopy. Now, I'd been off work the week before because I'd had wedding dress fittings, etc. And I was really busy at work, and I didn't go with him. He was fine. He said, no, I'll go off. I'll be back in a couple of hours. And I was like, well, I'm really busy at work, so if you don't mind, it would, again, what you wish you could do to turn back time for these things. And he, God, there we go. I knew it was coming.
Well, it's all right. Take your time. It's like I said to you at the beginning, you're telling me and potentially many other people the most painful time of your life. It comes with emotion, so don't be afraid of it.
So he came back, and I finished my work call, carried on with my work call, finished what I was doing. And then I thought, oh, he's not coming to see me. He usually comes into the office. And I went out, and he was, what I would say, faffing around in the garden. And I instantly knew. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I've got cancer. And you never actually expect. You see all these TV programs and adverts, and he said, but it's small and operable. They've found a tumour in my bowel. It's cancer, but it's small and operable. That's all
words you want to hear.
Small and operable. So you think, okay, massive blow, massive, but small, and that's,
And your brain doesn't automatically go. I mean, we hear the word cancer, and it is a scary word. It's a horrible word, but you still don't automatically think they're going to die.
No.
Because young people can survive cancer. Many, I've had friends who've survived cancer. It's survivable, and the words small and operable, they're the words you want to be hearing, aren't they?
So he had an appointment to see a consultant to go in for the operation to have it removed, and we went in for that, and they said it's operable, but it's not as small as you were possibly first made to believe. We've done further scans and investigations, but we still believe it's operable, but you may end up with a stoma. And do you want to rush this and try and get it done before your wedding? Obviously, you might be in some discomfort at the wedding, etc. Or do you want to wait? And we both said, no, let's just do it.
Get it done. Yeah,
we'll deal with the wedding. And so that he was booked in for the 20th of July. But between then and then, he had to have iron infusions because his iron levels were so low. And the first one went fine. The second one, he had anaphylactic shock.
Shit!
We rushed out of there, so that was something
Why
else.
Was that then? If it had been fine the first time, they
say it's just your body sometimes just reacts differently to it. The first one,
human bodies, man, they just don't cooperate, do they?
And it was sort of, then they were trying to think of other ways of getting the iron back into him, because obviously with it being a bowel condition, iron tablets can cause problems with the bowels. So, but they managed to get it to a level that they thought it was safe to operate on him, and he was booked in for the 20th of July. So I took him up there in the morning. Obviously, this is 4 weeks before we're due to get married. We'd been told the operation would be about 6 to 7 hours, so probably pick him up around 3 o'clock or go back up to the hospital around 3 o'clock. And we said our goodbyes, and I came home. And I think it was the last day of term, so the kids were both at school, and my mum and dad were coming over to kind of keep me occupied whilst he was in. So about 11 o'clock, his operation was due at 9. And at 11 o'clock, the doorbell went, opened the door to my mum and dad, and as I did, my phone went, and it was the nurse from the recovery room at the hospital, and she said, you need to come back up here, the consultant needs to meet with you. Ouch. And at that point, my world crumbled a little, not as much as you think now, but it went. And
well, you're still trying to convince yourself there's something else at this point, I imagine. The bargaining starts way before they die.
And luckily my parents had just arrived, because I was in no fit state to drive. My dad took me back up the hospital, and as I walked in, he was just coming round from the anaesthetic, and he went to me, "Oh, I think it's gone really well, darling. I think I'm going to be all right." And I said, "I don't think they've done it, darling, because you've only been gone, they've called me back up." And it was like he couldn't quite, under anaesthetic as well, I suppose, his mind was a bit all over the place. Obviously, I knew something was coming, but he was still a bit blissfully unaware, which probably quite nice at that point.
I was just thinking, I think I'd like to be anaesthetised at this point. Yeah.
And then I entered what I call the BBC drama phase. I felt like I was in Casualty when
Broadchurch for me personally, but yes, I can relate.
2 nurses, 2 consultants, someone I think was just there to hold my hand, and they came in and told us that he had peritoneal metastasis, so it had spread everywhere.
That's a big word.
Yeah, it was everywhere, all over his abdomen, all over the wall of his abdomen.
Oh my goodness.
And they had not been able to do anything with the tumour because it was everywhere, and and we were told it was incurable, and the rest of that conversation I just remember thinking, but we're getting married in 4 weeks. Like, what? This can't be happening. This really can't be happening.
I've gone cold even hearing you say it. It's because what you didn't actually mention in the interview, but I know from reading your application, is just how precious it was for you to have found him, and how grateful you were that he'd come into your life, after being on your own. And, raising 2 kids for 8 years is bloody hard. Well, and this was your happy ending, and I'm just feeling it being snatched from beneath you, and I'm not enjoying it, actually, Nina. I'm not enjoying it. but I am enjoying talking to you, so do carry on.
And I think at that point, you just, again, I just kept thinking, this is not really happening. This is, but there was a glimmer of hope, because they told us about this specialist hospital in Basingstoke, and he could have this big operation where they basically take out all non-essential organs, and they give targeted chemotherapy, and that might buy him 5, possibly 10 years extra. So I think you'll hear of all of these situations, someone goes, "Oh, it's the worst case scenario," but then they give you a little bit of hope, and you cling to that bit of hope.
Well, I'm going to, when we do the Friday episode following this release, I'm going to ask John to talk a little bit about this, because Sarah, there was a promise of an operation at some point in the process, it sounds very similar. It would leave you basically a shell.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Sarah's had deteriorated to the point where it would have given her days, not years. So to put her through, it would have been, they didn't think she'd survive the operation. But she kind of clung on to this idea that there was an operation, and why can't I have this operation, sort of thing, because it's been mentioned once.
We clung to, because the plan at that point was that they would, the guy that had tried to operate had actually taken video of inside Owen's abdomen to send to this hospital in Basingstoke, so they could see how severe it was, and so they could make an opinion. But obviously at that point, even just as you say, that hope that there is something that can be done to give us that additional time, you cling on.
And especially 5 to 10 years, that's a really large bit. It's not enough, but it would have been better, right?
You think of all the things, right, well, if we get this, Owen was Mr. Sensible. He had pensions, critical illness cover. You think, right, well, we'll just draw down everything. We'll borrow money. Neither of us will work, and we'll just
enjoy life.
But I think the hardest bit of that day for me was my dad was still sat outside in the car park, and I had to go out and tell him. And that was hard, because, as I say, they were like, best mates. My dad being in his 70s, my dad was very much why him and not me.
Oh, do you know what? That's made me go cold, actually, because my dad was exactly the same. That's really made me shiver, because he said I should go first, not him. And Ben had been like a son to them. So yeah, you forget it almost about the
Oh,
the in-laws.
yeah,
If you were lucky enough to have in-laws that love them, or your parent, you know what I'm trying to say. The devastation for them as well. And actually, I am trying to get my dad in to do an episode really from that perspective of how that feels to be looking in and not be able to protect your little girl from
yeah.
this as well.
Well, I think, when Owen came into my life, my dad had this massive sigh of relief, because he'd
This
been
was like Ben. There you go.
the
She's yours now.
man of the house, helping me with the kids, and he, was, as he said, I weren't getting any younger, and I thought, right, I can relax. They're all looked after. So he took it really hard. But even being back on the ward with Owen, and him having to ring and tell his parents and his family, and the first thing he said to me was, this is the hardest bit out of all of it, is knowing how hurt everyone else is going to be. And he was so brave, so strong, and so worried about the rest of us. But we came home and we clung on to this hope that Basingstoke something would come of that. And we were told that what Basingstoke suggested initially was that he has 12 rounds of chemo, and then they review, and if it's shrunk or has remained the same, then they may be able to do the operation. So again, you think, right, okay, just get through the 12 rounds of chemo.
Just the 12 rounds, we can do this. Yep.
And again, they were very good that they scheduled his first one in for before the wedding, so that we could get it underway as quickly as possible. So we had his first round of chemo, and then we had our beautiful wedding, which was everything I'd always wanted and was amazing. Very
I'm so
hard
glad
for
you got
him.
that.
Yeah, he got tired and he did have to kind of a little lay down in the afternoon, but it was still amazing, and everything. Yeah, everything he wanted.
It reminds me of Laura Malin, because they got married when she knew that her husband was not going to live, and it's that happiness tinged with sadness that this is everything you've dreamed of, but you know that there's a very high possibility that it's not going to be forever. And most people get married, and
even at that point, I still didn't think
a bit of denial was still having a go. Yeah.
It was still kind of we'll get through this. We've got through so much. We'll fight this. And then we had his dad and stepmom had paid for us to have a little mini moon, so we went off to Eastbourne for our little honeymoon, and that's when I noticed the pain he was in, and it felt bizarrely, and I still say to this day, it felt that the moment he got told it was cancer was the moment he got ill.
Okay,
because
yeah.
He'd, as far as I had known, he had not told me of any stomach pain or any. He'd always eaten well, we'd always drunk well, we'd always partied quite hard. And as soon as we knew it, he struggled to eat. He struggled, and obviously the chemo and probably the worry and the stress.
I was going to say the anxiety and the fear.
But we came back and we got prepared for the next round of chemo. Then he had a PICC line fitted, and I think we got the third round of chemo, and then he got ill, and we ended up back in hospital. He had to have an operation. His bowel got completely blocked, and he had to have an operation to remove some of that, and he ended up with a stoma bag. Cecil, the stoma bag.
Oh gosh, what was John's wife's called? It had a name. It's completely gone out. It might have been Barry, but yes, they did the same thing, because for Holly to sort of take Bob, I think, to say take away the fear almost. They gave a name, But for a man who, as you said earlier, was quite private about his toileting habits, that's a real sort of loss of dignity, isn't it?
Yeah, he he really struggled with it. But again, it was, well, you're here.
Yeah,
So
you're alive.
I'd rather have you in a stoma than nothing
Damn
at all.
right.
So, but he was not very good at being in hospital. He was he was the most amazing man in the world, but he had very little patience, especially for people who might not possibly be doing the best job they could be doing. And although our NHS is wonderful, there are some people there that are literally just collecting a check, and it's not the caring profession sometimes that you expect it to be. And he used to get very frustrated, and it was hard being his buffer and trying to keep things.
And cancer does things. It makes them irrational and angry and ratty. And they say like I'm generalising, but patients with cancer at end of life, they can tend to sort of say things they don't mean or react in the medic, whether it's the medication or the cancer. And you're right, you're the buffer. And sometimes you have to take the force of the storm a bit, and that's very difficult.
But we battled through that, and we got him home, and we learned to live with Cecil. And
why Cecil?
Cecil the cesspit.
Oh God, yeah, okay. And I like the fact there's a bit of dark humour even at this point.
We got used to dealing with that, and by this point, obviously, he hadn't worked since his diagnosis. I had an amazing company that let me take loads of compassionate leave. And then when I did go back, I was sort of, if something happened, I'd just switch off, and they were just brilliant. There was no pressure on me at all, but I was still trying to work. And obviously still run the house, dog, kids, feed people, food shop. Yeah,
and the world doesn't stop, does it?
No.
You're still getting the letters from school and telling you you've got odd sock day coming. Oh, that yours might be a bit older, I suppose. But yes, this enormous bombshell's been dropped into your life, and everything else. The dog needs walking, like you say. The food shop needs doing. But I am pleased to hear you had a lot of compassion from work, because that's one of my bugbears. Actually, is return to work.
Amazing, absolutely amazing, and his company were as well. They carried on paying him, and just basically took it as sick leave. And we it was nice for that not to be anything we had to worry about.
And that is one glimmer in this, is when people do the right thing. If companies and bosses do the right thing, then it takes so much stress away, because if you're having to think, how the hell am I going to pay the mortgage this month whilst your husband is fighting cancer, it's just, there are so many extra layers all the time. But yes, I'm very pleased to hear that you both had supportive workplaces.
And then I think the biggest issue, having him home, was obviously he was losing weight very quickly, and we were trying to feed him up, etc., and dietitians and juices and things like that. And I used to, again, widow hindsight, I used to get really frustrated with him, because he'd fancy all these different things to eat, and I'd run out to the shops and buy 10 of it and bring it all home and make it, and then he'd eat a mouthful and go, no, I can't eat it. But you need to eat, and you need to put weight on to have more chemo. And
it's really frustrating. And I've heard John say similar. He would cook, if Sarah fancied a roast, he would be cooking a roast at 2 a.m. if that's what she wanted to eat. And he told me, really we should do it. I'm speaking on his behalf, but when she was in hospital, she really wanted a Nando's. And so they drove to Nando's, and then she just got to the car park and was sick. And he said it was just heartbreaking, just watching her try, but also frustrating, because he would do the same. He had the dietitian making up the shakes and the not Huel, whatever one of them, actually it might be Huel, and trying to get it into her, though, was if you can't swallow and you can't physically eat, it's no matter how much trouble somebody tells you to, it's really difficult.
You'd sort of have 2 sips of this drink, and I'd be like, well, carry on.
Come on.
And I used to say, but it's a drink. It's not even food. I'm not trying to make you eat food. But I was so desperate to try and,
of course you were,
get him eating. And I think we got 1 round of chemo after that hospital stay, which then brought him out in a horrible rash, and the sensitivity with his fingers and toes.
Oh,
So all the
yes.
joy that chemo gives on top of the stoma and the stomach cramps and everything else. And,
Oh, cancer is a gift that keeps giving, right?
and then beginning of November, he started really sort of, his stomach was bloating, and he thought he might have a blockage again. So we went for a scan. And then on the 8th of November, on my birthday,
Happy birthday.
we had a call from the consultant to say that the chemo wasn't working, that the tumour was getting bigger, and
So
they
he's gone
didn't
through
think
all of that for nothing.
it was the chemo was working, and that they would probably now be looking at palliative care, which you don't want to hear on your birthday.
No.
I think I've changed the date of it for the rest of my life. But
Just move your birthday. Just move your birthday. The Queen did.
And then a few days later, he was really severely in pain, and we needed to call an ambulance to come out and take him into hospital. And he had ascites, which is a build-up of fluid in the abdomen, and they had to drain 6 litres of fluid from his stomach.
Poor guy.
And I think that hospital visit, he was in there, I think, about a week. And one of the nights I was in there with him, he had a dream that he was saying goodbye to us all. And I think that's when it really hit both of us that was coming quicker than we expected. But again, you still think, right, we'll get him home from this and we'll feed him back up and we'll get back
Try
to chemo.
again.
And then that's when the hospice started to get involved, and they came out to see us, and they did his DNR with him, and he asked her how long she thought he had, and she said, obviously no one can answer that, but what I will say is, when you're calling us once a month, you've got months. When you're calling us once a week, it's weeks. When you're calling us
daily.
So that kind of stuck with me. And then in November, we'd tried a referral to Royal Marsden, and we'd spoken to them in beginning of December, and they sort of looked at him and said, no, there's not going to be any more treatment available. And at the same day, we were seeing our local consultant, and they said, no, we're literally now going to give you steroids to help you have an appetite. We're going to give you sleeping tablets to help you sleep, and we're going to give you pain relief, and go and enjoy Christmas.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah. And in between that, he'd decided that we were all going to do a Santa fun run for our local hospice that were looking after us. So
Him too.
This time last year, all dressed as Santa, about 30 of us, him in his wheelchair.
I was going to say, how did he manage it? But wheelchair and Santa hat, presumably?
Sorry?
Wheelchair and Santa hat?
Full set. We all had full
Santa outfit.
Yeah, he was all over the local paper, and the hospice did an article on him because he'd managed to get so many people there. And I think that's when everyone really realised him showing up in a wheelchair.
That he was sick.
Then, people started to really, and again, the weight loss, obviously, being with him every day, all day, seeing other people's reaction when they saw him was really quite hard. My son is at uni, and he'd come home for Christmas, and some friends of ours were here, and Owen was in bed, and they were upstairs talking to him in the bedroom, and my son had come home, and he said, I'm going to go and say hello to Owen and get my stuff unpacked. And my friends still say to this day it was the hardest thing they've ever seen, is my son walk in and literally be taken aback as to how different Owen was from the last time he'd been home, a month or so before. So, everyone, December was awful, truly awful, but people were constantly here. Owen was very much reaching out to people that he hadn't spoke to in a long time. And
So he was quite keen to talk. Sorry, I've interrupted you, but so he was actually quite keen to speak to people and let people know what was happening, because
yeah,
often people don't want anyone to know. They're quite private, and that can put quite an extra burden on you, because you're then having to again be that shield. So it's quite, I suppose, unusual to hear of somebody who wanted to talk to people, especially a man. But I like that. I like that he felt that he wanted to. I suppose it's I don't know. It's the one thing that a terminal illness gives you, isn't it? It's the opportunity to say goodbye.
yeah.
I'm not sure. You can't glitter a turd, as it were, but there is something to be said for that, I guess. And how did the kids take it at this time? Were they kind of aware of how serious it was? And I know he's not their biological dad, but he's still an important figure in their lives.
Yeah, I think it was obviously affecting them. I think the problem was, from my perspective, was I didn't really see them that much. If Owen was in hospital, I was up there all day. I would be there till the end of visiting hours. Then I'd come home. They were obviously getting on with schoolwork and seeing their friends. So and he still tried so hard when he was around them to be him. And yeah, you could see it was really impacting them. As I say, when my son come home, I think that's when it really hit him, whereas my daughter had been here, and their relationship having gone from literally having to separate them sometimes years ago to she would now go in and sit with him and they would talk. And my son was scared, and being a teenage boy, I think, retreated, and they'd always been really, really close, but he retreated. He kept saying to me, I don't know what to say to him. I don't know how to look at him. Whereas my daughter threw herself full on. Can I get you anything?
Was Florence Nightingale'd up.
Yeah. It built their relationship. But yeah, so we had his friends in and out. His dad and stepmom would come down and see us, and my parents were here. So we had people in and out. And I think the hardest thing in the lead up to that Christmas was I was, by this point, sleeping on a mattress on our bedroom floor, one, so as not to disturb him, and two, I'll be honest, my coping mechanism was alcohol. So most evenings when I was finished caring and tablets and morphine and everything else, I would sit and have a drink. And
well, at least you weren't taking the morphine. Let's take every win where we can get it. And you know what? Alcohol is a really effective coping mechanism. It doesn't work long term, as I can attest, but there's no shame in it. You do what you got to do, right?
But he used to say to me, I can't stand the smell of it. So part of it was to help him.
You're not
sleep.
so fragrant yourself.
Yeah, part of it was to help him sleep, and part of it was to keep away from him, so he didn't moan about me drinking, which he did moan about. But I kind of said, look, you've got a bag on your own crap. I'm allowed to drink, mate.
I think that you were allowed to drink at this point. I think sometimes you've got to blot out a bit.
But in the lead up to Christmas, I would often wake up scared that he wasn't going to be awake when I woke up. But more often than not, I'd wake up and he'd been awake since about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he'd put his playlist together for his funeral. He'd put a playlist together for his wake. He'd decided where he wanted his ashes scattered. He'd decided what people should wear to his... And he kept trying to tell me, I'm going to send you this. No, I don't want... you're going to have to find somebody else to talk to about this and give these, because I'm not ready to deal with that now. So luckily, his poor stepmom, bless her, got all the Google maps of where I told you he was organised. Google map pinpoints of where he wants his ashes scattered. And
but this is a man trying to take back control, isn't it? This is a man who has had all autonomy and control stripped from him, and he's kind of thinking, what can I control? And I suppose it's something we should talk about is what we want to happen at the end. Dolly Parton, I will always love you. Thank you very much. At mine.
And I have to admit, in those first few weeks, when people were asking, it was quite nice to just go, there you go, that's what he
Yes, that
wants.
he'd done the plan. My grandma was the same. She did this this plan, and I think she said, "I've paid for such and such. If you want anything else, you'll have to pay for yourself." That was brilliant.
We'd organised our wheels when we first moved into our home together, purely because we'd had the conversation about if either of us died and met somebody else. And
it's complicated when you're blending families as well.
Yeah.
You do have to make sure that there's legal paperwork in place. We've had to do it, obviously.
He'd done all that, and my best friend has worked in probate, so she'd come round and they'd sit and she'd go through all everything. He'd done lists of passwords for bank accounts. He was the notes on his phone, telling everything what needed doing, etc. He was so organised. But we got through. So we had Christmas Eve, which was quite normal. He'd organised a family quiz, and we sat and done the quiz.
This guy, he's organised a family quiz while he's, terminally ill.
Yeah.
I can't organise a family quiz at the best times.
He'd sort the kids out with apps for buzzers on their phone, and
wonderful.
And then Christmas Day we got up and we'd sorted the turkey, and we were meant to have lots of family here, but we'd had to scale it back, so it was just my parents and kids here. And that's when Christmas Day, he looked really ill, and I remember thinking, he looks bad today. And then Boxing Day, we had to call out the nurses for painkillers, and he couldn't eat anything, and he looked really run down. And then we had to call him out, I think 3 times on Boxing Day.
Wow.
And then the next day he said, you need to call Provide and get them to come out, and I wouldn't do it. And I said to him, if I do that, that means that you've got days. Because
Nina, as you were talking, I was thinking about that, what the hospice nurse said, and I was thinking that's days. Yeah. Oh, you poor thing.
So on the 28th, obviously everything had reopened after Christmas, and we were waiting for the doctors to call and Farley to call to our hospice to call to sort out medication, etc. And he said to me, I just got out of the shower, I was drying my hair, and he said, they've got me a bed at the hospice. I think I should go in so they can help me get this pain under control, and it will just be a few days and I'll get the pain under control and medication sorted, and then it'll be fine. I'll come back home again. So we went in on the 28th, and the first couple of nights, it was like he was in hospital. I'd go up during the day, I'd come back. His family would be in and out. And then on the Friday, he was in so much pain that I stayed the night with him. The joy of hospice, not the joy, but the pleasure of a hospice, being able to spend the night and not
be chucked out amazing.
Of a ward.
Everything I'm hearing from people who have lost people to long-term conditions is that hospices are incredible. And actually, I'm helping out a children's grief event on Sunday, which is held at a hospice. And the first time I turned up, I expected it to be it's a children's hospice. I thought it was going to be the most, depressing place on earth. But actually, it's full of colour and vibrancy. And yes, it's a place where people do come to die, but they make it as, I don't know what the word here is, to sort of make it sort of as palatable as possible. As
the staff were amazing, and he was comfortable, and they were
the way you die matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, and us all being able to be there whenever we wanted to be there was a pleasure for us to be able to stay. So I stayed on the Friday. His dad stayed with him on the Saturday, which was New Year's Eve, because I came home to be with my daughter because she was on her own. He was still, at this point, people were still trying to come in and see him, and he was still making plans for the following week. And then New Year's Day, I know now, obviously, looking back through his phone, he'd started to message people saying, I know I've not got long now. And on the Monday morning, I'd pretty much, from New Year's Day, I'd stayed at the hospice and I didn't come home again. And me and his dad would stay the night in the room with him, and his mum and brother would stay in another room, but we were there 24/7 in the room with him. And on the Monday morning, a nurse came to find me and said, if there's people that want to see him, now is the time. He's deteriorating. So we managed to get his kids in.
And his kids were estranged from him, weren't they? Because I've actually lost visual on you, Nina. I can hear you though. But so that must have been a relief that you'd managed to get them to go in and see him, because I imagine that would have, even if they didn't feel it at the time, it would have laid very heavily on them in the future, had they not.
And for him, he was still sort of in and out, being awake at this point. So he did see them and he did speak with them and he knew they were there. So for us, that was a massive thing for him to see them. And then on the Wednesday night, me and his dad were in the room with him, and he woke up and snuck in a cheeky kiss, asked me to go and get something, and snuck in a cheeky kiss and asked me if I had my little leather skirt on for him.
Oh, did he?
At this point, his dad went, I'm going to leave you to it for a minute. But he was talking to me and telling me how much he loved me, and we got to talk. And then his dad come back in and he was telling me and his dad to order a rum and coke and get a gin and tonic. And obviously now I know that's what they call the surge. Again, at the time I did think this is the start of it, and he's having this lucid moments. And then, before that, I must tell you this bit before that, on the Monday, he decided to tell us all what we needed to do.
Okay.
I did tell you it's very
I'm intrigued.
So his mum, he told her she needed to get hearing aids because she was driving everyone mental that she couldn't hear anything.
This is the gift of deathbed, isn't it? You can say whatever you want.
Told his brother he needed to lose some weight and look after his health a bit better. He told his dad he needs to stop fretting and stressing so much because his dad's got Parkinson's, and he was saying, it's making worse. And for me, it was less rum, more running. And he was very keen to tell me that I needed to get back out running. And
have you?
I have.
Outrunning those demons, my friend. I feel you.
So we'd had, as you said, if there's going to be anything you can take from a long-term illness, was the fact that we got to have those conversations. He was very worried about how I would cope, and he'd had a friend that he'd known in his 20s who had got married, and his wife had died when she was 32, I think, of breast cancer. Now, he hadn't seen this guy. They'd kept in touch, but he hadn't seen him for years. He made sure that we connected. We had an extractor fan in the bathroom that needed sorting out. He kept going on about it, and I was, you're on your deathbed. I really don't care about the extractor fan. But he wanted me to connect with this guy who had lost his wife, and again found a message later saying, you're the only one that will be able to know how she's feeling and she won't cope. Please look after her.
So he's thinking about you, and there is so much love running through this. And I love the bit about the leather skirt as well. That's wonderful. But it's also tragic as well, isn't it? Because in order to put all these plans in place, he's doing this because of how much he loved you.
And then sadly on the Thursday, he didn't wake up at all that day. And
he just never woke up.
In the evening, he took his last breath with me, holding his hand, and his dad and his mum and his brother there.
I think, Nina, that's what they call a good death. it's little sympathy right now, and certainly at the time, but you want to go surrounded by the people that you love, not alone.
Yeah.
Oh, and then John has just told me actually earlier that when somebody dies in hospice, you're given a sealed envelope and told that you must not open it. You must take it to the council office. I don't know if it's the same in Essex. And so your husband has just died, and then suddenly you immediately have to take on the role of administrative.
I was very, very lucky in that my father-in-law, because we had a lot of kit. We had wheelchair, walking sticks, stoma kit, lots of different in the hospice room. And I remember saying to him, I can't have any of that come home. I don't want to have to deal with that once he's gone. And his dad literally said, you go home. I'm going to call your best friend. She's going to come and get you, and you go home and be with your family. You be with your kids and your parents, and we will deal with all of this. So
What
I
a
was
kindness.
very, very lucky that I got to say my goodbyes and go home and be with my family and my kids. So I didn't have to do, and his brother dealt with all the admin stuff. So I was very lucky in that respect.
And it is, I mean, one of my former guests, she actually runs a service helping widows with admin because it is so enormous. And I mean, from the sounds of it, your husband was very organised. Mine less so. And, many people have gone to check, life insurance policies and things and found that they're out of date or that they didn't cover certain things. And I suppose there's an element here of taking responsibility for your own demise, i.e. having a file where your passwords are, having a legal document that says what you want to happen to you and to your children, because where we're young, we don't think of it. I mean, I don't feel that young anymore, but it just seems so far away. I didn't have a will.
Well,
I do
even
now.
pensions. I never had pensions.
See, I worked in the civil service. I probably have got one somewhere I need to dig out. But
it used to drive him mad. He used to say, I'll be eating steak and chips and you'll be on like spaghetti hoops on toast. And because he'd planned for a future.
But did that mean that you were able to stay in your dream home?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Because I moved out of my house. I didn't plan. I wanted to immediately, but the cost implication of I would have ended up in a smaller house. So I stayed and just changed my house, and then obviously John happened.
No, at the moment I quit work. I went back to work. I think back in May time because I was on sabbatical. Which they'd kindly agreed, and I went back in May, did it for a few months, but I'm a conveyancer by trade. I'm a property lawyer, so my brain...
You need your brain for that, don't you?
Yeah, my brain could not cope, and I tried for a few months, and then in July, I said, no, I can't do this anymore. So I've not been at work since July, but I'm now looking to go back into work in January.
I think you do. I think sometimes, though, after something like this, you do need a break. And John and I, we both sold businesses, so we were able to enjoy some sort of half when he came out of hospital, enjoy this kind of almost semi-retirement, because you need to remember what's important. And he left his work and proposed to me, and it does make you realise what matters and what's important. And I'm glad that you have been able to take the time off, actually, because I do think women particularly, and I hold my hands up here, we just go until it just falls apart.
Yeah.
So although it does, but a bit of time off from work probably gave you time to think, Chloe. How have you found that?
Yeah, I would say the first 3 months are just a blur. Where you had fried chicken and wine.
I
had Nando's and rum.
There we go.
That was the staple diet. And just that blur of, and to be honest, when we said earlier about, the fact that I've come on quite early into my grief, I think I found Way and you guys back in March. I remember manically gardening.
We were really new then.
And listening to every episode you'd done in one weekend while I was manically gardening, because I first went to a support group and I was the youngest widow there by 20 odd years. And I remember some
It's the
lady
lack of relatability.
but some lady said to me, I haven't even moved his toothbrush or his clothes or anything, and I'm 6 years in, and I remember this feeling of panic that if I am going to feel this way in 6 years' time,
6 years.
I'm not going to make it. I'm not. And those first few months were dark.
Yeah, they are. They are.
If it hadn't been for my kids
I know.
and my dog, hand on heart, I wouldn't be here. I know
No.
I wouldn't, but
That's made me go very cold because I can relate. I remember going to the doctors and saying, I keep thinking, how can I just end this without hurting my kids? And he was like, I think we're going to pop you on some tablets. But
I think the thing that took me by surprise was the physical. Like, I expected the emotional effect of grief, but the physical, not being able to walk to the shops without feeling panicked and physically
did you get ill a lot? I used to get ill a lot, and I'm quite healthy, robust, quite normally. Luckily, not through any healthy living really, but I don't tend to get ill. And I just remember I used to get everything, and I was constantly run down. I mean, partly my boozy lifestyle, I guess, but it just seems to. And actually, I did hear that when you're running in this kind of fight or flight mode, that it does lower your immunity, so you are more susceptible to things. So there is a science behind it as well, which I had no idea about before this.
But I just remember thinking, I need to find a way. And I actually have that tattooed on my arm because that was my husband's favourite saying. If anything, if you ever had a problem, he would answer you with "find a way." There's always a way.
And is that what you have? Find a way.
Yeah, tattooed on my arm, in his handwriting. But that to me was, I can't stay in this position. I can't live in this state. So I need to. So yeah, way was a godsend. Someone told me about that. One of the hospice workers told me about that. And listening to the podcasts, hearing people come out the other side was all I needed to hear, was that people do come out the other side.
And actually that's really made me go goosebumpy, because that is all we ever set out to do, really, was to give people the opportunity to tell their stories, because you don't often get to, not full start to finish, but also to kind of create this feeling of empathy and stop the isolation, because it is really lonely. Like you're saying, my mum had some friends who were widows, but I didn't.
No.
I now have loads, and to the point that one of my kids said to me, do you have any friends whose husband haven't died?
Why did everyone say to your phone was so-and-so wid?
Like, yeah, I've got loads of wids in my, yeah. And all the guests going is waff.
But, so yeah, I knew that I couldn't sit and allow this to become me. It's still bloody hard, and there are still days I don't want to move. But
I cried at a wall at the weekend. It happens.
I've signed up for the London Marathon. I'm
running
the hospice that looked after my husband.
I did a marathon, have I mentioned it?
I'm going to put my medal up there. You're allowed to talk about it at any point.
Yeah, this is it. I've done one. I'll never do another one, but I'm officially a marathon finisher. We'll not say runner. But Lena, what I'm hearing here, and I've written it down and underlined it, is the choice. And this is where you make the choice. And every single guest of mine has made a choice, because they have made a choice to make their life better and to live, to grab onto, because there is still joy and wonder and fun in life. There's also hardship, pain and sorrow, but you have to, it's the analogy of kind of you throw somebody a rope, but they still have to climb up it. And this is where I can hear you making the choice. And this to me says that you are going to be okay. You're going to be sideswiped by grief, probably for the rest of your life, because accepting that is part of the process. But the fact that you are not even a year in and you are making that choice tells me what kind of woman you are, and that you're going to be all right.
He was so worried about me, and he said to so many people, I worry that she'll drink too much, which still rears its head on a regular basis.
Baby steps. I will have been sober 2 years in March, and I've been widowed 6 years, so it takes time.
but less run, more running. And that,
Yeah, because you can't really run hungover, can you? That's what I learned.
well, I
Throwing up in bushes.
I have been known to, but all I've got is what he hasn't got.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it.
I've got the getting up every morning, which he would have given anything for. So,
Well,
yes, it's tough. Yes, it hurts. But I'm a mum.
It's part of you, isn't it? And it really is part of you. The grief will, and perhaps one day you may meet somebody, but it doesn't. You won't stop grieving. It stays. It's like this kind of little Ben-shaped hole, sort of, and sometimes it becomes too much for me to bear, and the sorrow leaks out. But I've realised that's okay. And I mentioned the other week, I think, about just putting on his playlist and just crying in the woods in the dark at 5:30 in the morning. Very safe. But it's got to find some risk-taking activity these days. It's therapeutic and acknowledging their pain. There's big fan of Donna Ashworth's poem where it's about the grief is the loss, and the love it's love with. Right, I'm making a right pig's ear at this. Grief is love with nowhere to go. I think that's it, and it really is. And you wouldn't be human if you weren't feeling this pain, but you're also entitled to live a life yourself. And running is a really good way of doing it. I've been a bit slack myself, but I have been briskly walking.
But you've been ice bathing, so
Oh my!
I'd rather run a marathon than go in an ice bath.
Well, you might want to use it while you're doing your training. It'd be good for your rehab. My dad, actually, who is 72, is doing Land's End John O'Groats bike ride next year, and he was sort of talking to John about the ice bath, and I was like, Dad, you can't just get into the ice bath, you'll have a heart attack. You've got to build yourself up to it. You can't just get in 5 degrees. But I found the running, I found everything else hurt, so nothing else could. And like I say, it keeps you kind of alive, because in order to propel yourself forward physically, you have to eat, you have to sleep, and there is actually a book called Outrunning Your Demons, which is a catalogue of stories of people who ran to deal with addictions or losses, and that there is something in it. I really like yoga because I find it kind of connects me back into my body a bit. But I'm really honoured that you have told me your story today, especially with being really fairly fresh. What was the date that he died? I didn't write it down.
5th of January this year.
5th of January. Well, my wedding anniversary is the 4th, so we'll think of you. And I am glad that you got that wedding, and I would like to see pictures if you would send me them.
Definitely.
But Nina, for now, I just thank you. An incredible and tragic story, but essentially, like they all are, a story of love. And you can hear how hard the hospital tried to save him. You can hear how hard you tried, he tried. And it's that admitting that sometimes we're fallible and we can't, and that's really difficult. But I know that there will be many people who get value from hearing your story, and I certainly have. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Have the space to tell it.
Oh, and you know what? Anytime, come back again in a year if you like and tell us how you're getting on. You take care of yourself. I will stay in touch because I do with all of my guests, and I will, when this goes out, which will be in the new year, which is really confusing me, John and I will have a chat about it, and I'm sure he'll have lots to talk about. So I'll let you know when that episode goes out as well. But lots of love, Nina, to you and the kids, and to everybody who's listening. You take care of yourselves out there. And for now, it's bye from me.